So, coming into game one yesterday, it was a bit of a strange game. And I think the score in general kind of doesn't tell the full story of the game. Like, this was an 8-point game at halftime, which was a 3-point game. It was literally what basically happened was Fever ended the first quarter and the second quarter bad to go down 8 at halftime. And then both those quarters badly. Neither Kelsey Mitchell or Caitlin Clark did a shot. And the third quarter was relatively close. It was a couple of bad plays till the fourth, and then they just absolutely imploded down the stretch. Which can happen, especially with the shots Breanna Mabry was hitting. But at the end of the day, you've got... The only positives are the Sun are not going to shoot 50% from three again. As a team, what did they shoot? They shot 14, 15, 18 and made 3, 4, 9. They shot 50% from three. So, it's just not going to happen again. It's just not really going to happen again at all. Or they make 10? I don't know. Either way, around 50%. And in the Fever, made 6 threes from 23, 26, 28. They were 6 of 28 from three. You're not going to win any of those games. But one thing that I was really kind of concerned about is the talk after the game, and it was all about how Caitlin Clark was talking about how she kept better care of the ball. That it was like, oh, she didn't turn the ball over that much. And I'm watching the game, and I'm like, Caitlin, you didn't turn the ball over much because you didn't have the ball in your hands. Kelsey Mitchell your team turned the ball over as much as ever because you didn't have the ball in your hands. If Caitlin has 8 turnovers and everyone else has 0, the team has 8 turnovers. But if Caitlin has 1 turnover and the rest of the team has 14, the team still has 15 turnovers. And that's the one thing I don't get is I think that was a tactical thing. I think genuinely Christie Sides went and they went out with the tactics because after the game, Caitlin's still talking about the turnovers. They're talking about how Caitlin needs to watch the turnovers. I think they played so scared. They were so scared of Caitlin turning the ball over that they said, you can't turn the ball over if you don't have the ball in your hands. Caitlin, go play off the ball. And Caitlin Clark then, and this is what I will always say, is if you watch Caitlin Clark when she plays off the ball, is Caitlin Clark feels like she needs to get a certain amount of shots per game. It's very clear. If you watched her, say, I'm trying to think of the best game, the 3-point Liberty game. Every single time she caught the ball, she choked. And you might be saying, oh, but she only shot the ball, was it 10 times in that game? Every single time she touched the ball, she shot. Because she just wasn't touching the ball enough. And that's what the problem is. I don't understand why the Fever, if you want to look at the Indiana Fever, they really started going downhill after they made the playoffs. And I get it. We've seen teams do that. They're a young team. It is what it is. But if you want to look at the actual games and go back, it does seem like not necessarily her turnovers are gone down, but actually the funniest part about this is that this team wins more games the more her turnovers. The more turnovers she has, the more games they win technically. She averages more turnovers and wins than losses. But this reminds me of the Liberty game, where she has very few turnovers because she just doesn't have the ball in her hands. I don't think Caitlin Clark did anything great passing-wise. I think she made as many dumb passes yesterday per possession. I don't know, maybe she makes 2 to 3 dumb passes a game. She made 1 really dumb pass yesterday, probably had the ball in her hands a third of the amount. So if you look at how they finished the season, once they made the playoffs, which was after the Sky game, they were terrible in this Wings game. The Wings were just bad. The Wings did not play great other than Arike lighting them up. Caitlin Clark in this game had 28 and 12 with 7 turnovers. This was, again, when the return of Kelsey. Actually, no, Kelsey Mitchell was really good in this game. Sorry. Where was the game? Sorry, the Sparks game. Well, I don't know why I'm saying this game. The Sparks game was right after. This was the first game after Caitlin Clark won Player of the Month and Christie Sides won Coach of the Month. And then we start seeing Sides ball again. This game was the worst for it, the Lynx game, where it was genuinely Kelsey, go ISO. became like their go-to tactic. This game right here was the Aaliyah Boston show. Caitlin was very poor in the first half of this game. Caitlin was poor in 3 halves of the Aces games. Caitlin was unbelievable against the Wings, but it's very easy to be unbelievable against the Wings, and this was the bench. The last good game I saw the Indiana Fever play was against the Chicago Sky. If you watch the way the Fever played in this game, they were pushing the tempo, they were pushing the pace. And, like, I get it, the Suns' goal is to stop the pace, but, like, you can't let the Sun control how you play. The Sun played this game like it was a playoff game, by the way. If you remember this game right here, it was played like it was a playoff game. But the reason why Indiana won is Indiana won for 2 reasons. They completely blitzed them in the first quarter. And then even though Christie Sides did their best job to walk the ball up the floor for 2 quarters, they then played well in clutch time. And in their defense, the Fever, in crunch time, outside of this game right here, which the Lynx game. The Lynx game was close going into crunch time, and this second Aces game, where they really could have won both of them down the stretch. They've been good in crunch time. They were great against the Dream. They were great against the Wings in crunch time. They were great against the Sparks in crunch time. I get it. It was the Sparks. They were great in this game against the Wings in crunch time. Great against the Sun. Great against the Dream. They were great, again, poor enough against the Lynx. They did a great job when the Mercury came back of pulling that game out. So they've been closing games well. But it's like, you got to get to a position to close. And the problem is that you were so focused on Caitlin Clark not turning the ball over that you decided to not let Caitlin Clark necessarily be Caitlin Clark, and then Caitlin Clark does worse things. The less Caitlin Clark has the ball in her hands, the more dumb stuff she does. The more she chucks. And like, this is one of Caitlin Clark's worst games. But if you want to look at the bad game she's played, the more Caitlin Clark has the ball in her hands, the better the team is. The more she has the ball in her hands, the better Kelsey Mitchell plays. The more she has the ball in her hands, the better Aaliyah Boston tends. Actually, in fairness, Aaliyah Boston's different. Like, she hoops whether or not Caitlin Clark plays well. But a lot of the time, Aaliyah Boston helps Caitlin Clark, and Caitlin Clark helps Kelsey Mitchell. It's the reason why the big 3 work so well together. But yesterday, we saw the team resort to, I don't know, maybe Christie Sides was like, oh, playoff basketball is like, I don't know what's going on here. But playoff basketball, it's gritty, it's grinded out. We got to grind it out. We can't grind it out with Caitlin Clark. And it's like, man, you didn't even try. You didn't even really try. And it wasn't even like they were in the game at the start and then they blitzed them. It is what it is. Like, the Connecticut Sun shoot like that. If the Connecticut Sun shoot like this every game, they win the WNBA championship. It is what it is. But I just think tactically the Fever got it all wrong. I think what they did to Alyssa Smith is a joke. You do not start someone for morale reasons and take them off and have them on that short leash in the playoffs. Just bench her. Damaris Dantas is not a net positive for this team. I cannot stress that enough. She is not a net positive for this team. Like, she can hit some shots, but for every bucket she scores, she gives up one on the other end. And the problem is that Dantas, for some reason, Dantas is now playing freaking power forward. So you have got 2 players who at times look like they've got bricks in their feet playing power forward center against a team whose power forward is their point guard in Alyssa Thomas. Like, the only tactical thing that makes sense was leaving Alyssa Thomas open, and Alyssa Thomas hit shots. In fairness to her, she had a good enough game. She hit some shots. I thought she was horrific in the second half, but I thought she was very, very good in the first half. But they allowed the Connecticut Sun to outgun them. And it was just a complete failure in tactics. And look, it doesn't help. Like, even if Christie Sides got tactics perfect, they still lose this game. Like, they do. They still lose this game, even if, like, Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark both were laying bricks today, or yesterday. Like, Kelsey Mitchell shot the ball better, but like, what, 3 of her buckets were in garbage time. Caitlin Clark she's going through another bit of a shooting slump, but the problem is that when Caitlin Clark was going through a shooting slump before the Olympic break, what we saw Caitlin Clark becoming that point guard. We saw the pick and roll with Aaliyah Boston, and Aaliyah Boston seems to have forgotten how to short roll. Like, what she was doing so well in the time after the Olympics, or before the Olympics and right after the Olympics, was being that facilitator out of the short roll. Aaliyah Boston's kind of gone away from that for some reason. They're going away from the pick and roll, which is really rare, which is weird to see. And they're going back to Caitlin run around in a bunch of circles and Kelsey go dribble, 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 step back. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with this team. It was tactically a blunder. That's the only way to describe it by Christie Sides. But touch wood, they actually go and try to play fever basketball, because if Indiana are not able to impose themselves on teams, they don't have the talent. Like, people are being like, oh, Indiana have, like, they can compete with anyone. No, they don't. They got three players. You've got a hustle player in Lexi Hull. You have got a runner in Temi Figbenle. You have got Dantas, who every other player on the team other than Lexi Hull, their negatives outweigh their positives. Nalissa Smith's negatives outweigh her positives, especially for this team. Maybe on another team, maybe not so much. Temi Figbenle's negatives outweigh her positives most of the time. Demiris Dantas, I believe her negatives outweigh her positives. Kaylu Samuelson's terrible. Erica Wheeler is just what she is. Like, she's the Sydney Colson of this team. And the three of these players here, their positives outweigh their negatives. But again, none of them are flawless players. And I'll say Lexi Hull's positives slightly outweigh her negatives as a player. But that's it. You got 3.5 players whose positives outweigh their negatives. So the only way you're going to win this, especially when you're playing against a team that are as gritty as the Connecticut Sun, is by imposing your style on them. And if you are playing a reactive style and being like, okay, how are we going to stop this team? And not how can we make this team go out of their way to stop us? They're going to lose. Simple as that. Simple as that. They're going to lose. They have to impose themselves on the Sun, and they didn't even try to do that yesterday.